Hello, and welcome to the West Plains Connection podcast. I am Michelle McCullum, and I am on the West Plains Chamber of Commerce board. I am also a regional business manager with Avista Utilities, and I'd like to welcome today our chief economist, Grant Forsyth. Hello, and thank you for joining us, Grant.
My pleasure.
We appreciate you. Grant's going to be talking a bit about the economic outlook and growth indicators that we're seeing for the West Plains. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
The first question, let's just jump right in, if we may. We were wondering what indicators small businesses should be watching for in our region. What can they use to gauge economic growth in the West Plains?
Well, I would say I tend to look pretty regionally, and so the kinds of things that I look at, I think anybody in the West Plains could look at, because we really have an integrated economic area. So I tend to look regionally at things. But one of the things I really focus on as a leading economic indicator is initial claims for unemployment insurance, because that's a pretty good indicator of what in future employment growth is going to look like, and it's employment growth that actually generates a lot of demand for small businesses. The other thing I like to focus on is building permits, especially residential building permits, because that's another leading indicator of future economic growth, future employment, and future income growth.
Those are interesting factors. So for building permits in the Spokane region, I've heard that our building permits can be, the numbers have been a little bit challenging. Could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There was a kind of a surge in permitting as we went into the pandemic. And then, of course, because of the disruptions, permitting activity slowed somewhat. But we're starting to see permitting activity come back again. But really what's interesting is the nature of that permitting on the residential side. A lot of what's kind of keeping residential permitting strong is actually multifamily and in particular apartments.
That makes sense. And I feel like in the West Plains there is some availability for apartments. There is some availability for growth in that area.
That's right. And that really reflects availability of land. And really, if you look at, and I did look at this from the Office of Financial Management, they have estimates of single-family units, the number that are available in a particular region or city area. And they also have a look at, the estimated number of multifamily. And so if you look really since 2002, so over the last, 2022, over the last 4 years, the West Plains has really seen pretty robust population growth. It's been one of the fastest areas for population growth. But we've also seen a lot of new homes being put in their residential units, but that's been heavily bolstered by apartments.
That makes sense. And talking also, you'd spoken, one thing that's close to our heart over at the West Plains Chamber is looking at things like unemployment because of the fact that we work with so many of the businesses and we're trying to boost that. Do you have any data on what unemployment looks like for maybe our area or in Spokane in general? Yeah,
we're actually have a pretty low unemployment rate at this point. And this reflects kind of the robustness of the post-pandemic labor market. And so from an unemployment rate perspective, we're at a pretty low level. It has crept up a little bit, which is no surprise, simply because the economy has slowed a bit. But also a lot of businesses are going through another resizing, I think, post-pandemic. But really the unemployment rate is relatively low at this point. Employment growth has slowed, and that's an interesting story by itself, too, about what's happening with employment growth.
That makes sense. And speaking of businesses resizing, in your mind, what sectors are currently showing the most promise for growth, maybe specifically in the West Plains or at least in the Spokane area, and how can smaller businesses align with that?
Well, so going back to the issue of employment, you can look at you can look at the sectors that are adding employment and maybe draw some conclusions about where the strength is. And right now, really what's driving employment growth in the region is healthcare. And in fact, if you take healthcare employment out of the numbers, we really haven't had very much employment growth at all for the last 6 to 8 months, if you take the healthcare component out. So it's really driving a lot of employment growth. And so what you're seeing is a pretty good expansion of healthcare employment. Part of that is that sector filling in the shortages they had coming out of the pandemic, because a lot of people in healthcare retired or left that industry, because of the pressures of the pandemic, they're starting to fill those shortage slots. But we also have in the United States, and the region is no exception to this, an aging population that has a pretty high demand for healthcare, and that's also increasing the demand for healthcare workers. Right? So that is definitely a sector that is going to need to be served by both large and small businesses. I mean, I think we can just look across the border and see Kootenai Health in Post Falls is going to be building a large new facility, right? But I think if you even look on the Washington side, there's a lot of demand for healthcare right now.
That makes sense. And speaking of that aging population, in your mind, how does the population growth in our region influence economic development? What type of trends are we seeing right now?
Well, it is the fundamental driver, and the only thing really increasing population in our region is in-migration. I mean, if you didn't have in-migration, population growth in our region, depending on what sub-area you look at, is either going to be zero or negative. One of the things that's happening is that what we call the natural growth rate, it's the difference between births and deaths, is actually zero or negative in a lot of counties in our region, meaning that right now the death rate is just offsetting the birth rate, and in some cases the death rate's actually slightly higher than the birth rate depending on what kind of county you're in eastern Washington or North Idaho. And so really the big driver is people moving into the region.
So you're glad I moved here a year ago.
That's right,
Okay.
because and that's true. I mean, you're one of the prime economic drivers, because as population expands, so does the demand for all kinds of goods and services, which, incidentally, if we think about the West Plains, entertainment is going to be a big part of that because of the casinos, right? And so that's another, I think, opportunity for small businesses is serving the entertainment business. I think the other opportunity is going to be in things like warehousing, transportation, and manufacturing, because you have the space and the infrastructure, and including the airport out there to support that kind of activity.
That's excellent. And I know that I personally have been really enjoying the casinos, and they're doing the summer concert series. So they're also members of the West Plains Chamber. So a nice little plug for them right there. We appreciate them. Speaking about moving in, I was lucky enough to move in and have a fantastic job with Avista, but not everybody is. Can you talk a little bit about the labor force, either in the West Plains or Spokane in general? Are we seeing enough skilled workers to meet demand, or are you seeing emerging gaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the struggles right now are the trades, the skilled trades. I think we have a shortage of those folks. And so, because we for so long emphasized a 4-year college degree, we kind of underemphasized the trades. And so we really do have a shortage of people in the trades. That can be building, it can be manufacturing, anything like that where you have to have a high skill level, it's trade-based. We really have a shortage of those people. And the demographic of people currently working in that industry is getting progressively older, 50 plus. They're looking at some pretty big retirement waves. And the pipeline is not great, although I think we're doing a better job now of talking to younger people about opportunities in those sectors. I think also healthcare, I think that's another sector where I still think they have some shortage issues. And so the hope is you can kind of start to direct people to those places where there are shortages. The pay is pretty good, but requires kind of maybe a different level of training than just a 4-year degree.
And I know that question is a bit close to our heart because we work for a utility company, and we're always trying to get good candidates in our apprenticeship programs. But I know a lot of organizations in the area are like us, and we love for more people to be applying for our apprenticeship programs. We want to train those right people and give them an amazing career. All right, and looking externally, what economic factors, whether it might be statewide, national, even global, are likely to have the biggest impact in your mind on local businesses, let's say within the next 1 to 3 years?
Yeah, a couple of big things. I won't bore people with the details, but I did my dissertation at WSU on tariffs and U.S. trade policy before the Civil War. It was called the antebellum era, pre-Civil War. And the tariff thing was a challenge for the country then. It was very divisive then. It created a lot of economic challenges back then, and I think that's going to be the case going forward. A lot of businesses have not ever had to deal with tariffs before because we really moved away from it gradually following the Civil War and then pretty rapidly after World War II. So it's really a new kind of operating environment. And I recently spoke for the Association of Washington Business in Vancouver, Washington, and I got to talk to a lot of small businesses, and they are struggling with this issue of how to manage the tariffs. Not only the cost part of it, but what is their obligation in terms of paying the tariffs, kind of the bureaucratic side of it. So that's going to be a challenge. I also think what we're seeing in Washington, D.C., we're seeing, really the potential for some maybe large budget cuts coming down. And the truth is, a lot of small businesses support government activities. They are contractors, or they may be something like a restaurant providing food to City Hall. And so these federal budget cuts are potentially going to be quite large. In particular, if they're going to try to avoid any federal tax increases in order to balance the budget, they're going to have really deep spending cuts. And that's going to impact businesses potentially negatively, and they need to think about that. And the other thing related to that is, of course, we have a lot of private businesses that support Fairchild Air Force Base. And so again, if you're going to try to balance the budget without any federal tax changes, you're going to have to look at military spending, because all spending would have to be on the table.
And obviously, on the West Plains specifically, that Fairchild Air Force Base being a huge economic driver, we're going to get the trickle-down effect if they do look at government spending there too.
Yeah, it's a big deal because, we nearly lost the base. I mean, the base was politically we were in a difficult position, and I was on the Forward Fairchild Committee for a long time after I came to Avista. And it was a real struggle to get that base really in position not to be closed. And it's been really a huge deal that we've gotten the older tankers, because the new tankers are slow to emerge into service. They've had some service problems, so those older tankers are really important. And so to some extent, we really got lucky on that. But the problem is we worked really hard to preserve the base, see the base expand, but we're now in a situation where potentially the federal cuts could be pretty significant.
That makes sense. And I know as a West Plains Chamber board member, one thing that our businesses have been really concerned about and really focused on would be the uncertainty about tariffs. I mean, it's almost impossible to plan your year. Do you have anything that you could?
Yeah, so the thing I mentioned, and this came up at the Association of Washington Business in Vancouver, the presentation I gave, and I actually gave it with a Federal Reserve economist from the 12th District, which is based in San Francisco. And it was, he and I had never met. It was sort of a thing where we thought, okay, we'll see how this goes. And actually, he and I did well together. We were well matched, as it turned out. But, his view is that, most businesses could probably ultimately overcome or get used to a certain level of tariffs if they were not too high. My comment to that, I added on to that, is, I believe that to be the case. It would probably take quite a while for them to adjust to that because it's such a new operating environment. But they can't also keep moving the tariff rate around. Mm-hmm. And that's part of that real uncertainty that's creating problems for business. And the message I got from businesses at the conference in Vancouver, Washington, was that this constant uncertainty about the tariff level and the bureaucratic requirements around it has frozen them. Mm-hmm. And the only way you get around that is stability. You get the tariff rate set at some kind of quote unquote reasonable level, and then you leave it there to give business time to adjust. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that yet.
No, definitely not. And it's very difficult to forecast
Yes,
a budget
it is.
For your business when
right,
you have no stability.
Yeah, because right now the whole tariff policy is really being driven out of the White House more than Congress, and so it's kind of the direction, whatever direction the White House wants to go in, that's what we go, but it keeps changing.
Do you have any recommendations for smaller businesses, just looking at it from a higher level on how they could navigate that?
It's a tough call because it's not like you have staff you can assign to this and help you navigate. Now, the state of Washington, though, does have a website now available to try to help businesses navigate And at the top of my head, I can't remember where that is, but I think it's out of the Department of Commerce has set up a website. And so I think any businesses that are coping with this ought to go to that website. And again, I believe it's the Department of Commerce in Washington, to take a look at what that website has to offer.
That's excellent, and perhaps we can find that and add that as a banner to this
Yeah.
podcast. All right, stepping away from the hard tariff conversation, what are some of the top reasons a business might choose to relocate or launch in the West Plains versus another part of the inland Northwest?
Well, one, of course, is land availability and land cost, because we have attracted businesses from the west side, Portland, Seattle, the Puget Sound area, the Portland area, because land costs there for anything of any size, any facility of any size, is incredibly expensive, not to mention the congestion. And so the real advantage of the West Plains is you have space available, you are near a major freeway, you already have some development occurring around Amazon and the airport that may be beneficial to you. And so, again, that's part of the reason I think, in terms of opportunities for the West Plains, that whole issue around warehousing, transportation, and manufacturing, where you need easy access to transportation and freeways and so forth, puts the West Plains in a good position.
I would definitely agree with that, and I know we just became a BNSF certified site, and that's a big deal for the rail portion as well.
Well, and I think, the one thing I tell people about the region when they ask me that aren't from here, I say one of the big improvements to the region is how well I think the airport has been managed, the Spokane International Airport. Larry Crowder has just left. He was there for many years. But really, that airport is so easy to get in and out of.
Absolutely.
It has gotten more congested. They are expanding it. But we have a lot of advantages, I think, to getting people in and out of the region for conferences or just showing them the region, or people who want to have, a business center here and you need to maybe travel someplace else. That airport has really, I think, become a cornerstone of development, especially in the West Plains area.
Absolutely, and another nice thing about the airport, as a West Plains Chamber member, is we just got a new hotel,
Yes.
which is absolutely fantastic as well. And then for the airport itself, the new concourse is absolutely beautiful.
Well, and I think, it is interesting the number of people I know that live regionally but will stay in one of those hotels before a flight because they're trying to navigate, the flight chaos. And really, having a wide range of hotels has not just been great, I think, for people who are visiting the region, but for regular travelers who live here, being able to have a choice to stay out by the airport before they go on a trip. I'm seeing that more and more.
And one thing I'd also like to just speak about a little bit more about businesses choosing to relocate to the West Plains is it does seem to me like we have a very good skilled workforce on hand here in this area. Have you had that experience?
We do, and one of the things that we have in the region that I always tell the region we need to try to protect is we have a great educational system, right? And one of the things, it turns out, if you look at surveys of why businesses might establish someplace, really literally move employees that are currently in one location to another location, right? One of the things they look at, and people underestimate this, but surveys indicate this is important, is the quality of your educational system. Because you're potentially asking employees from one part of the country to move to another, and they're going to bring their kids, right? And if the educational system doesn't look good, it's going to be a hard sell. We are really lucky in the region because we have a broad range of, I'm talking K through 12 all the way through college, of both public and private institutions that can kind of meet just about anybody's need. Right? And that is a great benefit to the region. It's something that I think is something that can be marketed for people looking at this region, either to move here individually or move a business here or establish a business here. That school system is really important. Not only that, it's a source also of a workforce that can meet your demands.
Absolutely, and if the jobs are here, then when they come out of school, they'll stay here.
Exactly. You think about the community colleges. That's also, another great system for us. We've got a good community college system, and so, can we, as time goes on, continue to adapt that entire educational system to the demands of the labor market?
That's excellent. My son is going to Spokane Falls Community College, and the economics professor there has actually motivated him to want to pursue an economics degree. So now he's looking at Washington State and some of the others, and he just came up here a year ago as well. So I can vouch for the fact that it's actually excellent educational system.
Well, and the community college is a great place to start because you can go there and decide, do I really want a traditional academic track, or do I want a more of a trades track? And if you're not sure, the community colleges are a great place to start to kind of get that narrowed down without necessarily breaking the bank.
Absolutely, and we do have some great schools just right out on the West Plains, too.
We do. I worked at one for a long time.
I'm a fan. And one of the things I think that maybe gets missed on that, and the reason that my son moved out here is he was actually attracted. I showed him pictures of the campus, and I showed him pictures of the area. That quality of life factor is a big thing for college students as well.
It is, and it's not just for college students, it's also for everybody else who comes here, which I think, when we talk about challenges for the region going forward, I think one of the things I do worry about, and I do talk about this all the time, so it's no great secret, is the issue of wildfires. And, that's going to be a challenge, I think, for all of the Northwest, which has historically been a big draw to people because of the natural beauty, right? And so going forward, one of the issues is, how do we handle wildfires? What are we doing to mitigate that in the long run? Because pretty clearly what we can see summer after summer, it's going to be a persistent problem. Along with that comes the insurance issues. The insurance market all over the United States is struggling. Severe storms, wildfires, hail, you name it. And so one of the challenges, I think, for both homeowners and business owners is going to be navigating the insurance market and the cost increases that are probably going to be coming.
Absolutely. I do think that I spent the first part of my career in insurance, and one of the things I think that people do need to know is that there are mitigation measures that you can take in order to maintain your insurance and to find insurance with another carrier, and it's always important to reach out to different insurers and try to get an idea of different pricing and different options that are available.
Well, and I think, the insurance thing, it underpins so much. It underpins the building process. It underpins the buying process of a house. And we sort of took it for granted because it was just there and always functioned very well, in a very frictionless way, if I can say that. But definitely the insurance market is, I think, harder to navigate, and I think a lot of people are having to spend more time doing that research that you're talking about to maintain that insurance and control the cost side of it.
Absolutely. All right, and then talking about that quality of life factor, how important is it for our region to focus on quality of place factors, housing, recreation? We talked a little bit about schools and healthcare in attracting new businesses and retaining that talent.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we said. We talked about the wildfire issue, managing that's going to be important going forward. The housing issue is going to be really important because we've actually become, based on median family income, unaffordable. And so if you look at a lot of national analysis of affordability based on local median household or median family income, there's really only one or two counties left in Washington State that meets the criteria of affordability. And so the issue going forward is, how do we continue to have a stock of housing that is affordable, right? And and I think that's where the apartments are coming in, because I think because housing is relatively expensive, single-family housing, that given the population growth that we've had, and we've had quite a bit, it's those apartments that are absorbing it right now. And it's more in line with what I think a lot of people who are moving to the region actually make in terms of pay. So then that becomes longer run. What are we going to do about single-family home prices? It's a tough call, and it's going to be connected to tariffs. It's going to be connected to land management issues like the Growth Management Act. There's some tough things in there that it's going to make it hard to really bring down home prices in the short term.
And you'd mentioned the Spokane County Growth Management Act. I know, overall, but Spokane County specifically is actually addressing that right now. Have you seen some of the presentations about that? Did you have any thoughts?
No, it's been a while since I've seen much on it. But, one of the issues, not just on this side of the state, but on the west side of the state as well, is this whole issue of what growth management considers buildable land and what builders consider buildable land, and the two don't necessarily coincide. And so one of the issues that I think has to get addressed is that issue. How do you define buildable land, and how much of it is really available from a builder point of view for building homes on?
I think that's a great point, and I'm very impressed with Spokane County, having come from other places, because I was at the Spokane Home Builders Association meeting the other day, and Spokane County was presenting and addressing exactly those questions. So I think that they're moving in the right direction for sure.
And there is one other that I would throw in there about quality of life. And again, this is something I talk about a lot. It's no secret. So water quantity and quality is going to be a big issue going forward. And you can look around the U.S. at other communities that are running into both these issues, and it is an economic growth killer. And so one of the things the region really needs to start thinking about is that issue of not just how much water do we have, but how's the quality of it. And I know there are issues on the West Plains. They've been dealing with these issues for some time now.
And whether they're perceived or actual, it's going to have the same effect if
Well,
somebody's
right.
coming and looking at.
That's right. And even Texas, I read an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal. Texas, their legislature has gone through and reviewed their whole water policy for the state, because they're starting to discover that with the addition of big data centers, population growth, the draw on their water resources has been much greater than they expected.
That makes sense. I'm from Arizona, so water has been very close to my heart for a long time. We have things like special water districts that have been implemented, and I love that Washington seems to be handling the problems on their own, and
Yeah.
I think that that's a good thing, and I hope we're getting all the help we need, because you're right, that really is a challenge. All right, so I want to thank everybody today for joining us on the West Plains Connection, sponsored by First Interstate Bank. Please subscribe to our podcast and visit our website at westplainschamber.org. Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a real pleasure with this conversation.
My
You have
pleasure.
yourself a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.